We have an opportunity to use these new information technologies to vastly transform how we educate, how we communicate, how our libraries and our museums, the riches in them, the DNA of our society they contain, can go worldwide to the poorest communities, to the most distant communities. How teachers can be helped through embedded testing, and how curricula can be developed, because kids know how to use this stuff. And so what we have proposed, and what is being introduced to Congress, is a bill called the Digital Opportunity Investment Trust Act. We call it the Digital Opportunity Investment Trust because it's DO IT as an acronym. And that act will provide from revenues from the auction or leasing of the publicly owned spectrum, comparable in this century to the publicly owned land of previous centuries that financed education. Will provide $1 billion a year trust fund eventually to be spent in research and development. Modeled on the National Science Foundation, it will do for education and learning and training and public interest what NSF does for science and what the National Institutes of Health does for health. It will provide funding for research and development, for digitization, to enable all our citizens to benefit from these advanced technologies.
What's been the biggest obstacle to getting where you'd like to be with regard to the legislation?
Well, we really haven't hit any obstacles at this point. It has taken years of research, papers commissioned, economic studies to prove the need for this. And we have economic studies both from the most conservative economists to the former chairman of the National Science Foundation, who's talked about in this knowledge-based, competitive, globally competitive world, the need for tremendous advances in the quality of our learning, of our education, of our public services, the need for information, decent information about public health.
What's the biggest risk of not following through with this?
Well, there's the economics papers that have been commissioned, and by the way, all of this can be found on our website, www.digitalpromise.com, digitalpromise.org. But as the economic papers have demonstrated, that this country cannot afford not to have such a fund. There's legislation now before Congress on a bipartisan basis. It is going to the Commerce Committee in the Senate and in the House, because that is where the publicly owned spectrum policies are being dealt with. We have never had in this country, ironically enough, a public policy regarding the public interest uses of these revolutionary, these advanced information technologies. We've spent billions of dollars to bring the Internet into the classroom. We've spent nothing on content to make the Internet useful to the classroom in terms of curricular development. We spend practically no money, almost $1 trillion a year, on education in its broadest sense. We spend practically nothing on research and development for education. We're still educating students, as our Secretary of Education said, as we educated them in the 19th century, in a classroom with a blackboard. And here we have an opportunity to develop a constitutional convention that kids can participate in and ask questions of Benjamin Franklin and of John Adams. We have the opportunity to create an accurate 3D, anatomically correct human body, that students of biology can see how the blood flows and how the heart beats and how cells divide. Using game theory, we can develop, and in fact Congress has appropriated money to develop a prototype, so that kids can play games and see how drugs attack the immune system and how the immune system works and how the good guys fend it off and sometimes the good guys lose because the immune system is compromised by drugs or by alcohol. And so they get a real textural feeling of what can be done and what should be done in those terms. So the possibilities are enormous, and we simply are not taking full advantage of them.